Good morning. It is our last week of our series Unfolded. We have been looking at unfolding the Sermon on the Mount, those chapters in Matthew, chapters 5 through 7. And we've jumped all around from chapter 5 and a couple places and then over to chapter 7 last week, and dealt with a lot of things. It's hard to deal. We could preach on the Sermon on the Mount, and if we dealt with everything in it, that could be like a year series. We would do a year-long series and probably not cover the depths of everything that Jesus wrapped up. I mentioned last week that it's possible, some scholars believe, that this was a collection of different messages that were put together. I like to think he did it all at one time because it makes me feel better about preaching long. That he did this sermon like it was all one big sermon. It may or may not have been that way. It's all still his words and still truth. And we've looked at a lot of different concepts over the last few weeks, from loving your enemies to the different aspects of being salt and light. And last week we talked about the more that he has for us. Today I want to deal with this kind of final thing. We were in chapter 7 last week. I want to jump back to chapter 6, and I kind of want to end with this whole message with this idea of do not worry. Do not worry. It's a central theme in this chapter. But before we get too far down the road, I want to make sure we understand, because that's a word that we use, and it's not even the same word used all through this chapter, depending on which translation you look at. And so I want to give us sort of a modern definition, maybe not dictionary definition, but sort of connotation of what is meant by these terms. And before we even get into the chapter, let me just make a distinction between anxiety versus worry. Because those aren't necessarily, for what we're going to talk about today, aren't necessarily the same thing. Now, some translations you'll read in this passage, it doesn't say do not worry. It says don't be anxious. And you'll see that phrase used. The actual Greek word, back to the name, really doesn't mean what we would consider anxiety today. Just real quick, just so that we're clear as to what we're talking about. Here's the first place, so you start filling in blanks right off the bat. Anxiety is a debilitating state of worry that is needing assistance to overcome. You can't just overcome anxiety by yourself. Anxiety is something medical. It's something that goes deeper than just I'm worried about something. It needs some care. It needs some health care involved in that in some way. Sometimes it's just mild. Sometimes it's deep. But on somewhere on the spectrum, it is something that you need help with. You need someone to help you with a level of anxiety. Worry, when we talk about worry today, we're talking about everyday concerns in life. Things that are just everyday things that are concerning to us. And I would even break that down and say concerns are something that happens to everybody. Worry is what you do with the concern. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Let's jump right in, about halfway down this chapter, and let's look at where Jesus is speaking and talks about worry. In verse 25, we'll pick it up in verse 25, Matthew 6. That is why I tell you not to worry about everyday life, whether you have enough food and drink or enough clothes to wear. Isn't life more than food and your body more than clothing? Look at the birds. They don't plant or harvest or store food in barns, for your heavenly Father feeds them. And aren't you far more valuable to him than they are? Can all your worries add a single moment to your life? And why worry about your clothing? Look at the lilies of the field and how they grow. They don't work or make their clothing. Yet Solomon in all his glory was not dressed as beautifully as they are. And if God cares so wonderfully for wildflowers that are here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow, he will certainly care for you. Why do you have so little faith? So don't worry about these things, saying, what will we eat? What will we drink? What will we wear? These things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers, but your heavenly Father already knows all your needs. Seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and he will give you everything you need. So don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring its own worries. Today's trouble is enough for today. I don't know if Jesus was trying to be encouraging there. I'm not sure what that thought was. But I love how he ends this whole thing and says, don't worry, tomorrow's going to be bad. Today's bad enough. Don't worry about tomorrow. I've often thought Jesus worked in the spirit of sarcasm, and I think you can find that in his words so much. But listen, this teaching of Jesus is not just some quippy little advice. It is deep rooted in faith, and it is an appeal to us, to them at the time, and to us as we read this message. It's an appeal to having a kingdom worldview. He's trying to change. Remember what we talked about this entire sermon. The whole idea is he's reprogramming. He's saying, you've heard it was said this, but this. You've lived by the law, but this is what I really think you need done. I've come to fulfill the law. The law is great. It's wonderful. But I am the fulfillment of that. So let me help you with reprogramming how you think and what you do and moving to a kingdom mindset. Now, there's some issues when you hear this kind of teaching. And I heard somebody speaking to this, and I thought it was good because everything they said, I went, yes, I've had those same issues. Here's some issues that you might have with Jesus saying, don't worry about stuff. Here's the first one. I think it's easy to get to. And I'm sure there had to be some there that maybe said this. I don't know. Well, okay, Jesus, that's easy for you to say. You know, you turned water to wine, fed 5,000 people with 2 loaves, and 2 fish, and 3 loaves, and 3 fish. It was loaves and fishes. You fed 5,000 people. You walked on water. You raised the dead. You know, Jesus, I think you might be talking out of your divine privilege. That's what people would say today. You know, maybe you're this, or maybe you read this passage and you think this. Okay, that's all well and good, but that was a long time ago. And he's looking at those people saying, don't worry. They had this laid back sort of agricultural, you know, old-fashioned kind of view of things. They didn't deal with school shootings and elections. You know, I just have to say this. This is something it's bugging me this week. Annie and I, once we found the technology, I don't like to have to watch all the commercials, so most everything we watch isn't live. It's something that's recorded in some fashion now digitally. And I forget that it's recorded, and Annie likes to not watch something and let it build up, and then have like a marathon. She likes to watch them all back to back, you know, and what you would call binge watch off of, you know, things that are recorded. And I forget that some of the stuff we're watching was recorded like 6 weeks ago, maybe. And so I have found myself the last couple of days, Annie and I've had some time to actually hit a couple of those, you know, marathons. Although, let me just say, if you watch NCIS back to back, it can create paranoia. Don't do that. Somebody was following me here this morning. I'm telling you they were. I circled the block 3 times. Anyway, don't be careful what you binge. All right. But something that was bugging me yesterday, we're watching it, and I'm like, are they still running these stupid election commercials? And then I realized, oh wait, that was from, you know, you say people back then didn't have to deal with all that. They didn't have to deal with your friends and family being deployed in foreign deployments, or having to respond to things that are terrible, or getting doctor's reports like we get nowadays, or having project deadlines at work that create so much stress, or maybe just relational pressures. You know, some of you are like, relational pressure, yeah. And then some of you, the fact that Thanksgiving's in a couple of weeks are already just like, oh, you know. So you might say, well, they didn't have to deal with all that. Or maybe it's this. And this is funny that this thought occurred, because this is something that happened this week. I often say this to you, that when I'm about to preach on something, I don't know if it's my body subconsciously, or if it's God doing it to me, but I often will go through stuff and I could not sleep the other morning. I was worried about everything, and that's neither here. You know, it's like God kind of teaching me a lesson. But this was very specific. I'm reading this passage, talking to Annie about it a little bit, and talking about how God watches the birds and the flowers, and we were talking about this. No joke, I'm sitting on my couch over at the parsonage, and a bird flew headlong right into the window right behind me. I mean, just hit it hard. Boom! Smashed it. And then Annie, Thursday morning, funny story, Annie didn't realize that the 9 on that inspection sticker meant September. And I happened to notice, and I don't drive her car, I don't pay attention to that, and I happened to notice it this week, and I said, honey, you know, your car's been out of inspection for almost 2 months. I just didn't know if you want. And so she made a quick call, and Thursday morning, it was the next morning, I noticed it on Wednesday, the next morning, you remember Thursday this past week, the coldest, rainiest, windiest day we had all week? Annie was, you know, she made a call, and they said, well, yeah, we can, first come, first serve, but we just to let you know, people start lining up about 6 a.m. So Annie's up and out the door at 20 to 6, driving in that cold, windy rain, you know, and she gets there, everything was fine. She texted me, everything was good, you know, on the way home, got the sticker, everything's great. Well, then she gets home and she comes and sits down. She went, oh. I said, what's wrong? She goes, oh, I'm driving and it's dark and it's rainy, whatever. And this little tiny bunny rabbit ran right out. I could not, and I said, are you sure you hit? She goes, oh, it was like boom, 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 which I hit it, I think, with all the tires. I said, so you flattened a little bunny rabbit, you know? I said, honey, it's a circle of life. You just provided food for the beautiful buzzards that fly around in the air. That didn't seem to work. And then I told her I was going to talk about it this morning, and she got so angry. She's going to be so upset with me because she said, don't get up there. People, that's not funny. That's not going to work. Don't use that in your sermon. People don't want to hear about bunnies being flattened in the road. They don't want to hear about that. And then I kind of started piling on and saying, yeah, you're right. You know, that could have been somebody's pet that got out of the cage. And she was like, why would you say that? Now you definitely can't say that or whatever. Maybe you're reading this passage and you're going, yeah, God, I don't know, I can say based on my life this past week, I'm not so sure you're taking such good care of the little animals. And you might be asking yourself, can we really trust Jesus' words here? Can we trust these words to mean what they say? When he's saying, don't worry, but he's the Son of God. It was a long time ago, different time. And does he really take care of the animals? I don't know. Maybe those questions pop up in your mind. Let me talk about a couple of cultural responses that we have to concerns in life. And there's probably more than these two, but there's these two that kind of jump out. And I like them because they both have songs attached to them. And I think I talk all the time. I'll talk about what we sing here matters, and Zoe and I will look at songs occasionally, some different songs that come out, and she and I have this sort of shorthand, and she'll say, what do you think about this one? And I'll say, that's a good one for your car, which means the theology is kind of, it's all right. You know what it means. It's okay for you to listen to, but we ain't going to sing it in public because it might lead people down a path theologically. It's not good. And so what you sing matters. Well, music is a powerful tool. I mean, it really is. You can get a jingle in your head, and it's like, it means something. And so these two things are kind of, these responses are attached. Here's the first cultural response to concerns, is denial. Denial. This is best wrapped up in that wonderful psalm. What's not a psalm? Hakuna Matata. Anybody familiar with that one? Grandparents and parents of young children, like everybody, and it's been around long enough that maybe even some of you are like, you know that one. Well, so some of you probably know this. Hakuna Matata is actually Swahili. And it means, anybody know what it means? No worries. Yeah, no problems, no worries is basically what it basically translates to. And when Nathan and I, several years ago, back in 2012, were in Africa on a sort of safari, and we were with the president of the Bible college who lived there, and our driver actually used it in a conversation. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool to hear it. And my friend who's the president there just rolled his eyes. I was like, what is this? He knows y'all are tourists, and he's like, people don't say that down here. They don't really say that. But he was saying it like it's something they say all the time. He said, oh, come on, Hakuna Matata. Oh, you're like, oh, yeah, no worries, And even my friend was just rolling like, oh, he's saying that for you tourists because, everybody watches Lion King, you think that's Africa. That's what everybody says, Well, it is Swahili. I don't know that they use that expression all the time there. But it means no worries. Now, here's the problem, though. that philosophy, and if you want to argue about it, that it's a philosophy more than just song, it says in the song that it's a philosophy. You know the words? Okay, I'm not going to sing it, but it's, I can hear him singing, philosophy, you know. Hakuna Matata. I said I wasn't going to sing it, I did. It's hard not to do it. That philosophy that's attached to that song is a cultural philosophy of denial. It really is an abdication of responsibility. So, can't remember the movie. Let me paint the picture for you. Little Simba is supposed to be king. Uncle Scar has dad off, and no, they don't know that. But anyway, Simba is overwhelmed with the idea that I got to take over for dad, who got trampled in a horrific scene that's terrible for children. I can't believe they put that in the movie. You know, I don't even like to watch that scene. It's like, oh, I had a little tear right here. You know, it was terrible. And so Simba basically runs away from his responsibility as king. And he, in that moment, is saying, I'm just going to hang out with Pumbaa, which is Swahili for warthog, and Timon, this little meerkat. I'm going to hang out with these guys, and that's their philosophy of life. We're just going to, no worries. I almost said it. Hey, is it problem-free or trouble-free? Problem-free philosophy. How many of you would love just a problem-free philosophy? Yeah, come on. But basically that's saying, and here's the reality. If you remember the movie, it didn't work. It doesn't work just to abdicate your responsibilities and say, you know what? Here's how I'm not going to worry. I'm not going to worry about anything. I'm just going to abdicate all my responsibilities, let somebody else figure it out. And it didn't work in the movie. Didn't work for a little cartoon animated lion, and it won't work for you. But that is very common in our culture, that idea of denial. Here's the second one, and it's distraction. Distraction. Anybody familiar with the song, the chorus? Most of the chorus is not even lyrics. Let me sing the chorus for you. Yeah. And the end of that, I'm not going to do all the rest of it, is the title of the song, Don't Worry. Well, that sounds good. That's Jesus, what he said, right? Don't worry, be happy. Don't worry, be happy. Here's the message. Just replace worry with some distraction, the pursuit of happiness, something that makes you happy. Be happy. Don't worry, be happy. Happy, finding what makes you happy will keep you from worrying. Basically what it says. And listen, this song is this cute little song. Most of you kind of, based on your response, remember the tune and the chorus. Have you ever looked at all the words? Do you remember all the words? I mean, the first verse is kind of just explaining, here's a little song I wrote. You might want to sing it note for note, whatever. Here's the second verse. Ain't got no place to lay your head. Somebody came and took your bed. Don't worry, be happy. Well, it gets better. The landlord said your rent is late. He may have to litigate. That's the words of the song. And listen, we're not talking about, I stubbed my toe. It's not a nice day as I wish it were. Oh, it's raining today. I'm going to choose to be happy. No. He's basically saying you might be homeless. You might be facing a major lawsuit. But don't worry, be happy. Listen, there are many happy distractions that we can pursue to try to distract ourselves from concerns of life and keep them from worrying about it. Lots of them. Alcohol, food, relationships, games. Listen, there's many other things. Here's the reality. They don't keep us from worry. And a lot of them can actually be detrimental. Because here's the reality. You can distract yourselves with a lot of those things, and the cause of the concern that could cause you to worry is still there, and sometimes worse when you come back to it. Yes. And so distraction doesn't work. Denial doesn't work. Culture tells us to avoid worry by advocating responsibility. That doesn't work because it just doesn't. It's not practical. Then it says to find distraction, and that doesn't work because ultimately it's not helpful or even harmful. Listen, Jesus' words weren't easy. But here's the reality. He was the Son of God, but he was also 100% man. He was flesh. And so, yes, he did all those things. And I was talking to Annie about this, and she watches the message generally, like tomorrow morning she'll watch it. And after being with all your children, she can't do nothing else the rest of the day. And then generally by Monday morning she's okay, and she watches the message. And poor Annie has heard it like 3 or 4 times before she ever watches it, because I'm constantly bouncing stuff off. And I was telling her about this first issue about Jesus being, he can turn water into wine, do all this stuff. And Annie just looked at me. She jumped right to the conclusion. She went, well, so can we. Well, you're right. We have Jesus. The Bible says there's nothing he did that we can't do. He was doing it. He said, I only do this because of the Father. And we have the same Father. So really, Jesus experienced things. So that's really not an excuse. And even though it was a different time then, the reality is things were probably worse for them than they are for us. In that day, they had to deal with Roman occupation. They were occupied by an entire other country. They did not have freedom. They had to deal with maniacal kings, unscrupulous tax collectors, arrogant prefects. Well, we have some arrogant prefects, but we actually elect them. That's the problem. They had plenty of reasons to worry. They had plenty of reasons to worry about their kids coming home safe every day. And it's worth considering Jesus' words because they are just as relevant for us today as they were for them. And they're just as revolutionary today as they were for them. The things he was saying to them shocked them just like maybe some of us when we hear those words. But when we read verse 25, it's one of those verses that starts out this way. The first part of verse 25 says this, that is why I tell you not to worry about everyday life. This is one of those words, if you actually, in some of the older translations, it actually uses the word therefore. Therefore, so that is why, this is why. And so, obviously, this statement he's about to make and say, don't worry, is he's been building up to it. So, it begs the question, well, what is it? What is that? If that is why, he says, that is why you don't need to worry, well, then what did he say before that? So, let's back up to verse 1. Back up to verse 1. Put your seatbelt on. We're going to roll through these 24 verses. Watch out, he says. Don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven. When you give to someone in need, don't do as the hypocrites do, blowing trumpets in the synagogues and streets to call attention to their acts of charity. I tell you the truth, they have received all the reward they will ever get. But when you give to someone in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give your gifts in private, and your Father who sees everything will reward you. When you pray, don't be like the hypocrites who love to pray publicly on street corners and the synagogues where everyone can see them. I tell you the truth, that is all the reward they will ever get. But when you pray, go away by yourself. Shut the door behind you and pray to your Father in private. Then your Father who sees everything will reward you. When you pray, don't babble on and on as the Gentiles do. They think their prayers are answered merely by repeating the words again and again. Don't be like them, for your Father knows exactly what you need even before you ask him. Pray like this. Our Father in heaven, may your name be kept holy. May your kingdom come soon. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today the food we need and forgive us our sins as we have forgiven those who sin against us. And don't let us yield to temptation, but rescue us from the evil one. If you forgive those who sin against you, your heavenly Father will forgive you. But if you refuse to forgive others, your Father will not forgive your sins. And when you fast, don't make it obvious as the hypocrites do, for they try to look miserable and disheveled, so people will admire them for their fasting. I tell you the truth, that is the only reward they will ever get. When you fast, comb your hair and wash your face, then no one will notice that you're fasting except your Father, who knows what you do in private. And your Father who sees everything will reward you. Don't store up treasures here on earth where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven where moths and rust cannot destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. Your eye is like a lamp that provides light for your body. When your eye is healthy, your whole body is filled with light. But when your eye is unhealthy, your whole body is filled with darkness. And if the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep that darkness is. No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. Now, this is the passage right before he says, then that is why I'm telling you, do not worry. Not to worry. So what does he say? He starts by talking about giving to those in need. He actually defines righteousness by this. The word for righteousness used most commonly in the New Testament is diakonosine, which is the Greek word. It means a righteous standard of doing things. But Jesus uses it in this sense. He actually says, in some translations it says, be careful how you practice your righteousness in front of men. He describes righteousness as actually the most common understanding of diakonosine in that time was almsgiving, was the act and the function of doing that which was right, that had a standard, that was considered as the right thing to do. He warns how not to do it, and then he describes how you should do it. And he talks about prayer. He gives us that template of the Lord's Prayer. And in verse 11, it's interesting, in part of the prayer, right in the center, right in the middle of the Lord's Prayer, he uses that expression, give us this day, give us today the food we need, or give us this day our daily bread. And when he said that, every good Jewish person listening immediately thought back to Exodus and thought of the manna, the daily bread that God gave them. That was the connection. That was on purpose. He was basically making a connection to that. He was saying, give us this day our daily bread. He was saying, you've got to trust God daily. Then he talks about fasting, how not to do it, how to do it. But the point of what he's doing is not like a handbook. Here's how to pray. Here's how to fast. We can use it that way sometimes. Although some people find that passage. I've never been able to find that passage that says, when you fast, make sure you publish all the recipes of how you're fasting and get around to everybody and talk every day about how fasting goes and how you're doing and check on one another and talk about how bad it is and how much you miss dessert. I can't find that part, but we seem to do that. The point of maybe talking about fasting is the reward. How many times does he say that? When he's talking about prayer, talking about giving to those in need, talking about fasting, he uses that expression. You've already received your reward then. Don't do it for recognition here, he says, but for eternal reward. And he goes into that whole section talking about how you have treasures. I have treasure. It's stored up in heaven. And he wraps up that whole little section in verse 24 by saying, listen, here's the problem. You can't serve two masters. In life, you got two possible masters. He says there's God, and then there's stuff or money or things. And he says you can't serve both. You either have to help God, and as I always say, he builds his kingdom, but he wants to use us in the process, or you can try to build your own kingdom. He says you can't serve both. And he makes the point, and I like this, sometimes he doesn't come out of this passage and say, so therefore you should take a vow of poverty. He never even says the things are bad. He says you trying to get the things is bad. You trying to serve the things is bad. Don't do that. He actually says, I have treasure. It's laid up. You can have treasure in heaven. Here's his whole point, if I could summarize what Jesus is saying in this passage. You be concerned about the things that concern me, and I will take care of what concerns you. He's trying to get us to understand. He's saying, do for other people what they can't do for themselves. And I will reward you, and I will provide for you daily, because I've got treasure. So be part of the things that concern me. I've got a purpose for you. I'll provide for you. I've got treasure for you. So relax, breathe. The God of the universe has got you. The God of the universe that with one word spoke billions of stars into existence, whose breath animated billions of creatures. The one who we just sang about that gave his life for you. He's got you in the palm of his hand. So relax. Don't worry. Do not worry, do not worry. 3 different times he says it in this passage. He says it over and over again in different forms. He says, look at the birds, look at the flowers. And he's using this metaphor, this illustration to say, look, don't worry. Look at God's character. Look at how he treats his creation. The birds don't have to toil and labor. He's got things provided for them. Sometimes it's grain in a field or this. Sometimes it might be a flattened bunny in the road. Eddie's going to be watching this tomorrow morning, and he's probably going to come punch me right at this point. Listen, the birds don't have to worry, he says. God takes care of them. The flowers don't worry, and God takes care of them. Now, I wish some of you ladies that are obsessed with flowers would understand, God actually made the point here that flowers are waste and useless. That's what I read, because it says the wildflowers that are thrown into the fire tomorrow, you're going to throw them in the trash anyway. Why do we have to spend money on stuff? I don't understand. Maybe I got the wrong thing out of that, but he's basically saying those flowers don't worry. They look better than Solomon in all his splendor. God takes care of them, and he makes the point, and you are way more valuable than they are. But he's also saying this. He's also saying, you know what? Take a minute. Because he is using birds and flowers. He's using those as an illustration. But part of that is he's also kind of introducing a spiritual discipline. He says, you need to actually stop for a second and consider the birds, the flowers. Take a moment to look. He's forcing us to come to a place of rest, to remind ourselves of who God is and what he is like in the very nature of his character. He's saying, look and pay attention. He's a skillful creator. He's a good father. He's a generous provider. We can face the chaos and concerns of life when we trust the character of God. Just stop, breathe, take it in. Wonder for just a moment who God is and what he's like. You don't have to worry. I love this story I heard this week. This goes all the way back to the 1500s. There were a couple of guys that were involved in this thing called the Reformation. One we know, Martin Luther, we know that name really well, but he had this younger guy that most historians believe probably became one of his best friends. He was another theologian named Philip Melanchthon. I don't know if that's how you say it right. Is that how you would say it, Victor? Then it's got to be right. So Philip Melanchthon was like his good friend, this younger guy that was kind of, some people, I've seen some people refer to him as his protege. I'm not sure if Philip saw it that way. They really just were kind of co-laborers in this whole process of the Reformation. And this is the kind of relationship they had. One day, it is recorded historically, who knows, this, I found it on more than one site, so it's got to be true. One day, Philip comes up to Martin Luther and he says, this day, you and I will discuss the governance of the universe. And Luther looked at him and said, Philip, this day, you and I will go fishing and leave the governance of the universe to God. I love that response. Listen, Luther in that moment said, today, Philip, we are not going to worry. We are not going to worry about Reformation today. We're not going to worry about excommunication and Inquisition and people being burned at the stake. We're not going to worry about translating the Bible into German. We're not going to do any of that. We're going to go fishing and we're going to trust the character of God. We're going to trust God that he's got the universe and he's got us. Now, Jesus, if you notice in this passage, right in the middle of this passage, he's talking about the birds and the wildflowers, and he kind of throws in this little thing. He says, why are you, the birds don't worry, the flowers don't worry, why are you worried? Oh, you of little faith. Now, he uses that expression at least 4 times in the book of Matthew. He uses it here in chapter 6. He uses it in chapter 8, right before he calms the storm when the disciples come and wake him up and say, Jesus, don't you care that we're going to drown around the Sea of Galilee and there's that storm? And Jesus looks at him and says, why do you have, oh, you of little faith? Then he gets up and says, hey, be still, be quiet, and the storm stops. And in chapter 14, Another sort of stormy moment, when he's walking on water, Peter says, hey, if it's really you, can call me to come out to you? And he says, sure, come on out, Peter. And Peter actually walks on water for a second, starts noticing the wind and the waves and begins to sink. The Bible says, he says to him, oh, Peter, why do you have such little faith? As he's rescuing him from the water. Then there's another time in verse 16, you have to kind of look deeper into the conversation to know how Jesus meant it. But he's talking to them, and he just finished feeding. One of the times he fed thousands of people with just a little teeny couple of loaves of bread. And he starts talking. He's trying to teach into that moment spiritually. And he warns the disciples in chapter 16. He says, be careful of the leaven of the Pharisees. Talking about spiritually how something can puff you up. And that's what the leaven does in the bread. It makes it rise. It makes it puff up. And he's saying their religiosity can cause them to be arrogant and puff up. And he's saying, be careful of the leaven. But he starts talking about using that metaphor of bread. And the Bible says the disciples start arguing amongst each other. Did you forget the bread? Did you bring bread? Were we supposed to bring bread? And Jesus looks at him in that moment and says, oh, you have little faith. Do you not understand? I'm not talking about bread. I'm talking about spiritual matters. But here's the thing. Every time Jesus used that phrase, he's not doing it to tell people they aren't spiritual enough, or they don't have good doctrine, or they're not spiritual giants that can move mountains. He's not trying to demean their spirituality. It is always in response to someone or something that's not trusting God to take care of the situation. Whether it was troubled in a storm, whether it was thinking they forgot bread, whatever it is, Jesus is like, you just saw me feed thousands of people with a couple of loaves, and you're worried about bringing bread? First of all, that's not what I'm talking about. And he uses it right here in this passage on not worrying. He's not fussing and putting them down, saying, you're not faithful enough, you don't have enough faith, you need to be more spiritual. He's saying, oh, you that haven't learned to trust God. The whole point, this whole passage is about trusting God. He says, you have little faith. Don't you understand that God's got you? He's going to take care of you. He's concerned about the things that concern you. Relax and build a deep confidence in who God is. He is a skillful creator. He is a good father. He is a generous provider. Don't you understand this? Now here's the thing, and I'm going to deal with that third issue we have. It doesn't necessarily mean everything's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean everything's going to be okay. It does mean that he has it in his hands and he's got it under control. But just a few chapters later in Matthew 10, he talks about birds again. And this is what he says in the second part of verse 29. But not a single sparrow can fall to the ground without your Father knowing it. Yeah. Now that's comforting, right? We write songs about that. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. But I don't want to miss something in this verse. He says, your Father knows when a sparrow falls to the ground. Not flies and takes flight and is pretty and tweeting. When a sparrow, he's saying the birds are going to hit a window every once in a while. The bunny's going to get flattened by a crazy woman driving in the rain too fast. That's going to happen. He's saying not everything's going to be perfect in life. There's going to be concerns. You're going to have concerns in life. But God still has it in control. He still is concerned. And the point is, a sparrow might fall to the ground, but God sees it. He knows it. Listen, life is not going to be perfect. Stuff's going to happen. You're going to take some body blows. Understand, he doesn't say, I will make sure that you are never suffer, that you never go through anything or whatever. He does say, I will always be with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. I see what happens. I'm concerned. I hear your cries. But here's the reality and the questions we need to ask ourselves. Do we believe there is a good Father who does indeed work together for the good of those who love him or are called according to his purpose? Yes. Do we believe that? Yes. Relax, he's got you. That passage he winds up with, he says, don't worry, look at the birds and other things. We get to verse 31, and listen to how it reads in the New International Version. So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows what you need, and he knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Now, when he says pagans here, actually, in the New Living we read earlier, it says unbelievers, pagans, some translations say Gentiles. He basically was saying any non-Jewish people, consider who he's talking to here. He's saying non-Jewish people, people who don't believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who haven't been taught this, who don't follow the law. Remember, that's what the Sermon on the Mount is. He's trying to reconnect them from the law to what he's doing in fulfilling the law. He's saying, even those people that don't follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they don't believe in God, Jehovah. He's saying they run after stuff. They strive after it. They're working as hard as they possibly can, believing that the only way they can survive and be clothed and fed is out of their own energy and out of their own capabilities. But you, he says, you who believe in God, you should live differently. You don't live like the pagans do. You live differently. Don't live like one who doesn't believe in God. Live like you believe in God. Don't be, several years ago we talked about this, we did a series on this. Don't be a practical atheist. You know, a practical atheist is someone who says they believe in God and then goes about living their lives in a way that completely denies his existence. Saying that we believe in God, but then believing that everything is up to us. We should live in a way that's different. It is interesting to me that he uses these two verses. He says, don't do like the pagans who, and the New International here says, run after. Some translations actually say seek after. It's the Greek word epizeteo. And then the very next verse he says, but seek. Zeteo, it's the same word. Epizeteo means to seek after. Just seek is zeteo. And he uses an imperative sentence there, which starts right with the verb. So what's the understood subject? I didn't mean to go into an English lesson. What's the understood subject when you start with the verb? You. But, so I don't think I'm adding to Jesus' words here. It's understood. But you seek. The pagans seek, but they seek the stuff. But you who know better, you who do believe in God, or profess to believe in God, who say you believe in God, you seek, but you don't seek after the stuff. You seek Him. Hey, Jesus is saying, don't deny the concerns of life. Don't abdicate your responsibility with a Hakuna Matata mindset. Don't just pursue happiness and distractions that are meaningless or even harmful in an attempt to get rid of worry. He says, seek me and my kingdom and my righteous way of doing things. Concern yourself with what concerns me, and I will take care of what concerns you. He's saying, take responsibility. Don't abdicate responsibility, but take responsibility for something bigger than yourself. And trust that I've got you. Do something for someone else they can't do for themselves. Trust that I am your Father, your generous provider, your skillful creator, and I will take care of you. Seek His kingdom and His righteousness. Live radically different every day. Leads us to me another question then. Do I live my life in such a way that it literally screams to the culture around me that I actually believe in a loving and a living God? Do I do that? Or do I live in such a way that denies His very existence? And if we're going to live in a way that says we believe in a loving, caring God that is concerned with us, then we've got to have a greater vision of God's kingdom and His care. See, we're going to face concerns every day. That's Bible. Jesus said you will have trouble. You're going to have concerns. Things are going to come up. Things are not perfect. It's how we respond to them that will determine whether we let them develop into worry or not. So when Jesus says don't worry, he's not being flippant and saying you're being silly. He's saying you have a choice. Let's talk about that choice for a second. Let me close with this. Hopefully this is something that's practical, because I read this and it sounds great. Okay, good. But where do we go from here? How does that help me today when I walk out of those doors? So here's our response to daily concerns. Here's our response. 3 things. 1, choose prayer over worry. Choose prayer over worry. Take your concerns, the concerns that you get hit with, and turn those into prayer prompts. Turn those into things to pray about. I've actually run into people that were having all kind of issues, were worried and everything else in their life. And I'll say, how can I help you pray? I don't really have anything to pray about. I was like, yeah, you got plenty to pray about. You just aren't praying about it. Your concerns should be your prayer prompts. Those should be the things that you do that. Listen, don't deny your concerns. Don't do that. There are people that have made whole religious movements out of just denying your concerns. I am not poor. I am not sick. I am not, No. That's Hakuna Matata theology. That's not it. You don't deny it, and you don't look for distractions. But turn them into prayers. Paul says it. Listen to what Paul says in Philippians 4:6. He's almost quoting the words of Jesus here. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. Listen, worry is a choice. Peace is a choice. And the thing that stands between those two is prayer. You choose whether you're going to worry about something or not. You choose. You can't choose concerns. Concerns are life. That's going to happen. But you choose what to do with them. And you choose, when you choose to make it in prayer, that brings peace. So take those moments of legitimate concern, that doctor's report, those issues with your kids or your work or your neighbors, your job. Turn them into prayer moments instead of concern moments. Then they won't be worry moments. Choose prayer over worry. Here's the second thing. Consider others' needs. Do something for someone else, something that someone can't do for themselves. Make someone else's good your highest priority. Do something this week for someone who can't do that thing on their own. And trust that God will see that righteousness and reward you in return. Can I tell you, you don't have the time and energy to worry about all the concerns of your life when you are helping someone else with theirs. When you focus on others and you consider others and you consider helping them and you focus on their needs, you tend not to have time to worry about your own. I find it very interesting that it's a phenomenon I see it in I've spent most of my life in gatherings and church kind of meetings and those kind of things where we gather and this happens. Although I would suggest that this is also true in other situations. Just my experience is more in a church situation. But there's something physiologically about the body. One of the habits, there are several habits when I was studying in both undergrad and graduate school. I studied conducting, and I love to conduct, mostly choral conducting. I also did some instrumental, but especially in choral conducting, there are several bad habits you can develop as a conductor, as a director. One of those really bad habits is to sing along with the choir, to sing along with it. Now, this habit is often created in church circles where you don't have any men, or there's just one or two, and so you wind up singing the men's part, trying to bolster that kind of thing, and you do it. But it's a bad habit, and here's why. Physiologically, when you are producing sound with your vocal cords, okay, the sound is not just produced here in your vocal cords are here, and you blow air across them, they vibrate at a certain pitch. like a guitar string or piano string, and it creates a tone, okay? And then your God-given sinus cavities, I know some of you think those are only there for allergy season, but they have purpose. Your sinus cavities create a resonance, okay? Picture it this way. If you look at a guitar, and if that guitar, I'm not talking about an electric one where you have pickups that are producing that vibration through something electronic, but a guitar that is not hollow inside is not going to be as loud. It's not going to make any noise because it requires that cavity inside the guitar to take the vibration of the strings and create a resonance to do that. It's the same way in buildings. This building is somewhat resonant. It's not the worst. There are other buildings not far from here, just over in the big city, that I can't stand to sing in because they were created so dead. It's like a studio. And when you sing, the sound just does nothing. You sing and all you hear is yourself. Compare that to somewhere like a cathedral, something where everything's made out of stone and marble, and you talk. And it has that, sing something in there. I'll never forget the occasion I had to be with a bunch of ministers in the rotunda of our capital, our nation's capital, and we began to sing. And I forget what we were singing. It was How Great Thou Art or Amazing. It was something that everybody knew. And we were singing. It was the most amazing thing in the world because the resonance was big. Okay. You have a built-in resonance. It's in your head. When you produce sound with your vocal cords and it resonates in your head, you know what else is all attached to that cavity thing? Your ear canal. So if I'm trying to direct a choir and I need to hear what they're doing so I can make sure that you need to sing a little louder or you soften, and I've got to listen to it. If I'm singing, I can't hear. Understand how that works physiologically? I can't, if I'm producing sound in my head's vibrating, it also fills up my ears and I can't hear you. Now here's how that plays part. If you're at a concert or something, if you've ever been at a concert or, you've ever been in a church service and somebody's just doing this, it's too loud. I would guarantee you 99.9% of the time that person is not participating. Because if they would just sing, they wouldn't notice. Because when you're singing, you don't hear it. Because you hear it yourself. God made you to sing. And when you stop participating, this is free, this wasn't even in my notes. When you stop participating and step out and become a critic, it's going to seem to, I can tell you right now, it's going to be too loud. You're not going to like it. You're not going to like to hear it. Because God didn't make you to sit back and listen. He made you to participate. He made you, that would be a good place for an amen right there. It's just like, amen. Okay. But here's the reality. Here's how it pertains. I know some of you are wondering, how does that pertain? Because when you focus on others' needs, that's like you're participating. You're singing. You're participating in God's righteousness. You're doing what He's called you to do. And when you do that, guess what? You don't hear your concerns as much. You don't focus on them. It's not that they go away. Okay? It's not to that. But you trust that God's going to take care of them, and you don't spend wasted energy and effort worrying about them being taken care of because you focus on others' needs. Yes. So choose prayer over worry. Consider others' needs. Here's a third thing. Change to a kingdom perspective. Get outside yourself and focus on something bigger than yourself. Change your perspective. This has to do with reminding yourself that God is your creator, that He is a good Father, that He is a generous provider. Remind yourself. That's what Jesus was saying here. Look at the birds. Look at the flowers. Look at something bigger. Look at who God is. Focus on His character. Get a kingdom perspective. Get a perspective that's bigger than all of this. Get a perspective. There's a lot of times, especially when it was warmer and I was able to run outside, and I stay hot most of the time. I can run outside, but breathe in the cold air, my lungs are not a fan, and so I don't do that very much. And so in this last couple of weeks, in this sort of changeover when you don't know if it's going to be 75 or 40, and it feels like that in the last few weeks. And listen, I know I could just step out on the porch, But I will pick up my phone and I'll look and see, what does it say the temperature is? And I'm sitting there trying to find it, and I'm going, where's the temperature? And Annie just steps outside and goes, well, it feels kind of cold. You know, it's like, that would be easier probably. But I am a slave to technology, I guess. And so I'll be looking at it. Sometimes, though, I can look, and if I look outside, I'm like, oh, it looks, I don't know if I want to run, because when I run for 30 minutes. I run 15 minutes away from home, 15 minutes back towards home. And it looks kind of cloudy. I don't know if I want to run. And my perspective is very narrow. It's just right here. I'm just looking up right there. And I'm going, I don't know if I do. And so what I have to do sometimes is I'll take my phone and I will pull up my weather app, and I'll pull up and look at the radar, which is looking at like the whole area. When I first do it, it's like the whole southeast, and I zoom in and I get to where I can see like the entire area. And what I can do is I can see that, oh, well, it is raining in Charlottesville, but there's no, and it's moving that way. So even though it looks cloudy, when I get a bigger perspective, when I see the overall perspective, sort of that 30,000 foot perspective, I can tell, oh, I'm probably okay, because it's moving away. It's on its way out. God has that perspective. That kingdom perspective is so much bigger. And if we stay in our little narrow, we talked about a couple weeks ago, or maybe last week, talked about narrow framing and only considering just our options that we have right here, and we don't consider that we have the limitlessness of God's kingdom. If we don't have that perspective, we can keep things so narrow that we don't have that perspective. And it can cause us to worry about things that we don't even really need to worry about, that God's already in the process of taking care of. Or maybe we see it in a way that we don't see the concern as something that is afflicting us, but something God's using to help us to something else. And when you begin to see things and change your perspective to something that has more of a kingdom world, biblical worldview, you can start to look at those other things. It's how James could write such nonsense as consider it joy when bad things happen to you. Like, what an idiot. How can he write that? Because James wasn't looking with his tiny little perspective. He had a kingdom perspective. He had a perspective that said, God's got this. He's in control. He's holding the universe in his hands. So is life good for me? Not so much. But God must be doing something else. Maybe God's got something bigger. So I want to challenge you this week to choose prayer over worry, to consider the needs of others, and to change to a kingdom perspective. Not just because it'll make life better, but it'll let you become the disciple you're supposed to be. And can I tell you that making that choice, not just to pray about things, but that choice to trust him, and trusting him is what this is all about. Choosing to trust him. That isn't a one-time choice. That's an everyday choice. That's a choice you got to make every day. Now, I'm not talking about your salvation per se. You make the choice to follow him. I can pretend I don't hear that feedback, but I do. And I don't think it's feedback. I think it's something Annie's doing downstairs. I think it's some music. So I can tell some of you feel like, oh, it's going to get louder. It's going to feel, that's not a thing. I can make it feedback. Okay, I stand corrected. That was feedback. Connor. Not my mic. Connor. Here. Mute everything but my microphone. Just mute it. That little button that says mute, just do it. You're getting all kind of, you're getting English lessons today. You're getting audio lessons today. Hey, which one did you mute and it went away? You don't know. He was doing it so fast, he doesn't know. Okay, we got some more work to do. All right. I tried to prove to you it wasn't feedback and proved the opposite. Truth seeking can do that sometimes too. You have a choice today. Now, for some of you here watching online today, tomorrow, whenever you see this, some of you maybe you need to make that choice for the first time. Maybe you never really made that choice. Maybe some of you made it years ago. Maybe some of you made it yesterday. I'm telling you, make it again today. Make it again today. Say, I choose. I with intent choose not just to follow Christ, but to trust him to be the Lord, the authority of my life. I choose to serve that master, to seek after him and his kingdom, and stop trying to do things and do it on my own. Make that choice. And once you do, then step into those three. Then choose prayer over worry. Choose, consider others' needs and change your perspective. But it starts with making a choice for him. Making a choice for him. Doing that today. Will you pray with me? Father, I thank you. I thank you right now for those that are making a decision right now. Maybe it's not the first time, but they're making a decision today. They're saying, I choose to follow you. I choose to trust you. I choose that even though I proclaim to be a Christian, a believer, I would have said that before today, but I choose today to actually live it. To not just be a practical atheist that says I'm a believer, but then lives like you don't exist. But I choose today to trust you in my actions, in my words, in my deeds. I choose to actually act like I trust you and not worry. God, we choose today to not eliminate every concern. That is up to you and your divine wisdom and providence. But God, today we ask you to help us to choose you, first of all, to seek you, to seek the things that concern you and let you take care of the things that concern us. Help us to choose prayer over worry. Help us to consider others as our top priority and focus on others before we look at ourselves. And help us to change to that kingdom perspective that looks at things the way you do and sees the fact that you are in control, that you have us in your hand. Lord, I thank you for the way that you're going to use us in your kingdom this week as we make the right choices to follow you, to live as your disciples, to live as those who actually believe what we say we believe. We praise you, Father.